Indie games have dramatically changed the video game industry for over the past decade and a half. Whilst there is no definitive list of mechanics or ideologies indie games prescribe to, most popular indie games take a well-established subgenre, like Metroidvanias, and push them into a new direction or give them a new art style. 2010's Limbo is a perfect example of this. The cinematic puzzle platformer brings to mind thoughts of Flashback, Another World, the original Prince of Persia, Abe's Odyssey, and the monochrome palette and 2D perspective ensures that the developer Playdead's vision can be met within a modest budget and staff. Limbo was one of the first big hitters in a slew of indie games about big-headed children puzzle platforming their way through an oppressive, dystopian, or atmospheric world. Other notable entries in this subgenre include Little Nightmares 1 and 2, Never Alone, Typo Man. You could even argue that games like Braid and Limbo helped get the new Oddworld greenlit, and EA were probably taking notes when they chose to publish the Unravel games. Whilst this subgenre is not new, it certainly has become more popular as a financially and artistically viable way to tell a video game narrative. The thing is, I'm not a huge fan of any of these games. Many of these games seem just too simplistic or trope heavy for me to really enjoy, or one half of the puzzling and the platforming dynamic underdelivers. Even Limbo, the hugely influential game that it is, I've started it about half a dozen times, but I've never had the energy to finish it. It's probably got something to do with the trial and error deaths, the samey backdrop, and the constant crate pushing. So maybe this subgenre of games just isn't for me, so why should I keep hitting my head against this brick wall? Well, I do it to play games like Inside. Inside is Playdead's second game, the follow-up to Limbo, and in this video I'll be detailing 5 ways that Inside improves the standard puzzle platforming routine to deliver a game that is far better than its contemporaries. Number 1. Layers. Inside has layers, and I don't mean this in like a pretentious sense, the game literally has layers. Look at Limbo, it is flat. The foreground, the background and the character layers all convey the same information. Inside has layers. Okay, the player has to concentrate on the layer with the buildings, but the background tell a different story. These people are being transported like cattle. Where are they going? Here we get a silhouette of a vehicle and a man. The straight lines of a man-made bridge or dam contrasting with the crooked lines of the forest, and the dogs come in from the background to give the player a fighting chance of reacting in time to avoid being killed, rather than being subjected to trial and error death after death. Here the camera zooms in to manipulate space and increase tension. Here windows give us a greater sense of place. This sunset gives us a brief sense of hope, but is offset by the mystery of why these people are lining up in such a uniform manner. We know we want to help, but we know we need to keep our distance for now. Point 2. New. Okay, so I cannot say definitively that Inside does anything majorly new or one of a kind, but it's always giving the player new challenges, in the sense that you'll never be asked to solve the same puzzle twice. You push a box to reach a high up ledge? Great, tick that off the list, you will never be asked to do that again. Swim underwater to avoid a flashlight, hide under an overhead bridge to avoid a spotlight, jump over these twigs to avoid tripping and being caught by the dogs. These are all one-time occurrences, and if they are duplicated, they are massively changed or altered to actively punish the player for trying to solve a new puzzle with an old solution. So yeah, that means number 3, no tedious puzzles. We've all pushed blocks onto pressure plates, lit torches to open a door, pulled on a crank to move a hanging platform. This is Puzzle Platforming 101. It is the simplest and most basic form of interaction in these games, only required in the very early tutorial sections as a default template to be worked on. And yet, in my experience, so many of Inside's contemporaries lean on this stuff over and over again, using narrative beats to break up the plain Jane puzzle elements, or a list of basic puzzle elements are strung together to make a sequence that is less about being genuinely complex and more interested in being needlessly convoluted. And the thing is, Inside is not actually that complex. It's a lot easier than most of its competition, but the game is still inventive and engaging. Because of A, what players must do is never in doubt, B, the interaction is just as fun to fail at as it is to succeed, and C, success always comes with nice feedback. Let's take this really simple early interaction as an example. This floor is badly repaired, we know we can break it. We find this safe placed precariously at the end of this plank of wood and situated exactly above the broken floor. I love this setup. For all the analogues to concentration camps, human experiments and slavery, this game is happy to give us a set piece straight out of Looney Tunes. So A, what the player must do is never in doubt. We must drop the safe to break the floor. B, the interaction is just as fun to fail at as it is to succeed. Let's take a look. And C, success always comes with nice feedback. Point 4. Tonally appropriate set pieces. Memorable set pieces in these kinds of games are usually the stuff of broken glass, being chased by a helicopter, sliding down the side of a building, and so on. Inside definitely gives you some of that stuff, but the really memorable stuff conveys a sense of dread, of comedy and tension in this kind of magical, macabre cocktail that I can honestly say I've never really experienced in a game before. There are lots of great tonally appropriate set pieces that I love to talk about, but I am desperate not to spoil anything, so I'll give very loose highlights to 2 early examples from the first quarter of the game. The first is this set piece where you must pretend to be one of the slaves, being observed along the production line, hoping not to be sniffed out, praying that you can put in the correct robotic commands at the right time. It is the most intense and absorbing QuickTime event, whilst also being a darkly hilarious pastiche of QuickTime events and the lowest forms of play interaction. I love it. Second is this. There's no comedy here, this is just basic primitive terror. You need to prise off these 3 planks of wood to slip through the doorway, but the player only has a small window to prise 1 plank at a time. Thus, the player must indulge in this dance of climbing over one side of the chain link fence, shaking their delicious body around to tempt the dogs to abandon their post, then hop over to the other side to pull off another plank. You know what, doing this encounter at the time seemed pretty scary, but watching it back now I can definitely see the comedy in it. That in fact leads me to my final point. Point 5, inside is freaky. For every horror movie trope like running through a field of corn, there is also this unsettling moment like using a barrel of dead pigs as a crash pad, or pulling a parasite out of an animal's bottom, or many other disturbing and freaky encounters involving pigs, amphibious children and bags of flesh. All stuff that I really cannot show you as they are really best experienced firsthand. Rest assured though, this game keeps upping the ante when it comes to being both darkly funny and stomach-churningly weird. And that's all I can afford to tell you about Inside without spoiling too much. This is hands down the best puzzle platformer I've ever played. It deserves the critical praise, and at 3 to 4 hours long, this exceptionally paced game definitely deserves your time. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.